They say you never forget your first real test. Mine came on a rainy Thursday night in Jackson Heights, Georgia, population just under 10,000, a place where folks still leave their doors unlocked and nod at strangers in grocery aisles. But none of that mattered when I saw those red and blue lights flash behind me. I wasn't speeding, I wasn't swerving, I was just a woman in uniform headed home, until Officer Brent McAllister decided I was something else. Let me back up. My name is Major Serafina Lang, and I've served in the U.S. Army for 15 years. I've seen desert ambushes, led disaster relief, and navigated politics tougher than the terrain. But nothing prepared me for a roadside stop in my own country by a man who thought the badge on his chest made him a king. I was 2 hours out from Fort Goldwell, headed back from a logistics summit in Savannah. Dressed in casual civvies, my service uniform folded neatly in the passenger seat. It had been a long day, but I felt good. One of those rare drives where the road calms your nerves. Until that cruiser swerved out from behind a billboard and tailgated me for half a mile. I pulled over. Calm. Collected. I'd been trained for every kind of situation, but still, my fingers tensed just slightly as I placed them on the steering wheel. My driver's side window came down halfway. The rain spattered lightly against the doorframe. Then he approached. Broad-shouldered, mid-40s, with that slow swagger some small-town cops develop when they forget they're public servants, not gods. He didn't introduce himself, didn't smile, just barked, "License and registration." No probable cause, no explanation. I kept my voice even. "Good evening, officer. Can I ask why I'm being stopped?" He leaned down, flashlight shining straight in my eyes. "Drifting lanes. Suspicious behavior. Step out of the car." I blinked. "Excuse me?" I said get out of the car. Now. My heart rate ticked up, not from fear, from recognition. I'd seen this before. The escalation, the subtle intimidation, the absence of protocol replaced with ego. I reached slowly into my glove box, keeping my movements deliberate. As I handed him my documents, I said, "This is a government vehicle. I'm a federal officer returning from a military conference." His lips curled upward, not in respect. "Military, huh? That doesn't mean you can swerve all over state roads." "I wasn't swerving, sir, and I'd still like to know the specific violation." "Oh, we'll get there," he said, pulling at the door handle before I could even respond. That's when I calmly lifted my phone and hit record. "This interaction is being documented," I said, camera pointed just enough to catch his posture, his holster, his face. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something behind his eyes. Not fear, but awareness. Still, he pressed on. "Step out, or you'll be forcibly removed." So I stepped out. My posture was straight, my voice was firm. I didn't shout, I didn't resist, but I did look him dead in the eye and say, "Be very sure of your actions, Officer McAllister. This is being recorded." He made me do the walk test, in the rain, on the shoulder of the road where puddles formed in uneven gravel. I passed every step without hesitation. When he handed me a citation for erratic driving, I took it without comment. But in my mind, I was already writing a different kind of report. One that wasn't filed with a traffic division, one that didn't end at the curb. Back in the car, soaked and silent, I pulled onto the road again. The glow of the citation paper sat on my dashboard like a dare. I wasn't looking for revenge. But I was about to give Officer McAllister something he wasn't used to: accountability. And trust me, he had no idea who he just tried to intimidate. By the time I made it back to Fort Goldwell, the early morning light was just starting to smear across the horizon. I parked the SUV in my assigned slot behind the command building and sat there, watching the sun burn through mist. That citation sat folded on the passenger seat like it was daring me to forget. But I don't forget. Not when silence could have cost me more than pride. I walked into the operations wing, boots echoing head high. No one had to ask where I was going. My office at the base was modest, ranked for a major, yes, but I never cared much about decoration. What mattered were the binders, the field maps, and the laptop that now held a blinking cursor and an open incident report template. I wrote the whole thing in one sitting. Every word, every movement, every second of that encounter. I included the dash footage from my vehicle, embedded the phone recording, and cited both the Department of Defense transportation guidelines and Georgia's code on lawful stops. Then I CC'd 3 people: Fort Goldwell's JAG officer, the Inspector General's liaison for Southeast Operations, and Colonel Tara Vaughn, my commanding officer, and the closest thing I've ever had to a battlefield sister. By 9 a.m., my inbox was already filling with replies. JAG responded first. "We'll need to elevate possible constitutional violations. Do you want media discretion?" No, I wasn't hiding behind red tape. Colonel Vaughn followed next. "Good instincts, Lang? I'll escalate it to the DOJ's Civil Rights Review Board personally." An hour later, I received a call I didn't expect. "Major Lang?" "Yes." "This is Lieutenant Eric Candler with the Georgia State Review Council. You submitted footage of a traffic incident involving Officer Brent McAllister?" I nodded instinctively, though he couldn't see me. "We've had other complaints. Yours is the first with evidence. We're opening an official review. Expect follow-up." I sat back in my chair, so this wasn't his first time. He'd just finally met someone who knew how to swing back with facts and chain of command. Meanwhile, in Jackson Heights, the world was still pretending nothing had happened. Officer McAllister was still on shift, still wearing the same uniform, still believing the law bent for him and him alone. But now his name was sitting in inboxes across military, legal, and civilian channels. And there's one thing a man like him fears more than consequences: exposure. Later that evening, Colonel Vaughn stopped by my office in person. She didn't knock, just walked in, closed the door, and said, "You want to take this all the way?" I looked up. "Yes, ma'am, I do." She nodded. "Then we'll need witnesses, records, statements, and we'll need to prep you for court." Court. It hadn't hit me until then. This wasn't going to be solved with a strongly worded email. I was going to see him again, and this time it wouldn't be on the side of a highway. It'd be in front of a judge, with every mistake he made laid bare under oath. The next few days moved like drills. I met with legal counsel, reviewed body cam policies, filed for public access to his dash footage, which was mysteriously corrupted, but that only made things worse for him. Because now the story wasn't just about an unlawful stop. It was about a cover-up. A week later, I got a call from a journalist. Not a tabloid hunter. This was Layla Monroe, the civil liberty beat reporter from the Atlanta Tribune. "I received an anonymous tip," she said, "about a military officer filing a civil rights suit against a small-town department. The name Lang came up. I didn't confirm or deny. I just asked, 'What are you really trying to write?'" Her voice softened. "I'm trying to write a story about what happens when power is abused, and what it looks like when someone finally stands up." I didn't say yes, but I didn't hang up either, because the more I prepared, the more I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about every woman forced to keep her tone polite when her rights were being trampled. Every soldier trained to de-escalate, only to be baited into looking uncooperative. Every civilian who didn't have a camera or a rank. This wasn't just about one stop on a rainy road, it was about drawing a line. And this time, I was the one holding the chalk. 3 weeks later, I stood at the base of the Fulton County Courthouse steps with my uniform pressed and my spine straight. This wasn't my usual battlefield, but it felt like one. I wasn't carrying a weapon or issuing orders, but I was still fighting. For truth, for accountability, For every woman who'd ever been told she was too assertive when she simply refused to shrink. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than I expected. No jury yet. Just polished wood, overhead fans, and that faint scent of old paper and nerves. Officer Brent McAllister sat at the defense table. He didn't recognize me at first, not until I sat down across the aisle in full dress blues, medals, insignia, and name tag clearly visible. That's when he blinked. Hard. Like he suddenly realized this wasn't going to disappear quietly. The judge entered, Honorable Camille Everhart, a woman with sharp glasses and an even sharper presence. She didn't waste time. Court will now hear arguments in Lang versus McAllister. McAllister's attorney, a thin, gray-haired man with too much smirk and not enough substance, stood. Your Honor, we contend that Officer McAllister was acting within reasonable scope and suspicion. He droned on, citing blurry statutes, stretching definitions, dismissing context. When he finished, my attorney, Captain Yasmin Holt, stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't pace or posture. She simply pressed play on the footage from my phone. The room went quiet as my voice echoed through the speakers. This interaction is being documented. Then the rest unfolded. The threats, the forced sobriety test, the rain, the unnecessary citation. When the video ended, no one moved. Even the judge didn't speak right away. Then she turned to McAllister. Is this your voice in the video, Sergeant? He swallowed. Yes, ma'am. Did the defendant resist? No. Did you conduct a sobriety test without probable cause? He paused too long. I believed she was swerving. Do you have dash footage to support that? No, Your Honor. It was corrupted. She arched an eyebrow. Convenient. Then it was my turn. I stepped into the witness box and took my oath. I thought I'd be nervous, but the moment I spoke, my voice was clear. I wasn't pulled over because I broke the law. I was pulled over because I didn't submit fast enough. The courtroom listened. I recounted every moment with detail, not emotionless, but measured. I didn't need to embellish. The facts were enough. Then came cross-examination. McAllister's lawyer tried to poke holes. Major Lang, isn't it true you could have de-escalated by simply exiting the vehicle immediately? I followed protocol. I kept my hands visible. I asked for cause. That's not escalation, that's survival. He shifted tactics. Would you say your military rank gives you a sense of entitlement? I stared at him. No. It gives me a responsibility. To lead. To protect. And to speak when others can't. When I stepped down, I saw something I didn't expect. A young black woman in the gallery wiping away tears. Later, I'd find out she was a local college student who'd been stopped 3 months prior by the same officer, but had no evidence to file a complaint. Now she had a voice in the room. Mine. When McAllister finally took the stand, his tone was different. Not hostile, defensive. He tried to justify his choices. Talked about training, stress, intuition. But then Captain Holt asked one question. If Major Lang had been an older white male in a suit, would you have made him exit the vehicle? McAllister didn't answer. Not out loud, but the silence was louder than a confession. The trial wrapped in 2 days. The jury got the case just before lunch. By 3 p.m., they were back. 12 people filed in, eyes forward. The foreman stood, cleared his throat, and said, "We find in favor of the plaintiff." The damages weren't huge. $30,000 in civil compensation, plus a formal referral to the DOJ for policy review. But it wasn't about money. It was about the fact that for once the story didn't end with a ticket and silence. It ended in truth, and it was on record. Forever. Outside the courthouse, a few reporters had gathered. One asked, Major Lang, any comment for those watching? I paused, then said, power without restraint is danger. Power with accountability, that's law. Then I walked away, not victorious, just steady, because the battle wasn't over. But I'd made it clear. I wasn't backing down. I returned to base the next morning like it was any other Tuesday. Except it wasn't. Not because of the verdict, or the headlines starting to circulate, or the quiet emails from reporters wanting exclusive interviews. It was different because for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not as a rank, not as a woman in uniform, but as a person who didn't fold under pressure, who didn't stay silent. Colonel Vaughn was waiting for me outside ops with 2 coffees in hand. She handed me one. You made us proud. I looked at her. That wasn't the goal. She smiled. No, but it's the outcome. What followed wasn't loud. There were no parades, no press conferences, no glittering photo ops, but there was change. Subtle, systemic, real. McAllister's precinct opened a review of his record. Turns out my stop wasn't isolated. 3 other complaints resurfaced, 2 from women, 1 from a teenage boy. His badge wasn't stripped, but he was put on probation, demoted, and reassigned to desk duty. Not punishment, limitation. Because a badge is only as good as the person who wears it. And his had lost its shine. At Fort Goldwell, I was asked to deliver a lecture. Leadership Under Fire. I kept it simple. True discipline isn't how you act when the world is watching. It's how you carry yourself when you think no one will ever find out. A few months passed. Then, out of nowhere, I received a handwritten letter. It was from the girl I'd seen in the courtroom, the one with tears in her eyes. Her name was Maya. She wrote, I never thought someone like me could win, but you didn't yell. You didn't rage, you just stood still and let the truth speak louder. I'm applying to law school now, because if you can do it in uniform, I can do it in heels. I keep that letter in my desk drawer, right next to my deployment medals, and a small folded note from my mother that says, your silence is not your shield. There's this myth that strength comes from noise, from fury, from fire. But I've found it in stillness, in quiet resistance, in restraint. I didn't file a lawsuit to win headlines. I did it so the next time someone in uniform is pulled over and spoken to, like they don't matter, there's a record that says, someone stood up. Someone said, enough. And someone proved that accountability isn't an attack. It's a promise. To serve. To protect. And to remember we all wear something that makes us visible. For some, it's a badge. For others, it's a rank. For me, it's my name. Major Kira Lang. And I remember everything.